big legendary blowouts, I think of the Stern as you versus the Dice Man.
Those were so fun. We're sitting there one day, and Dice was going to come on the air, and a couple of days later, and Howard brought it up, and I must have said something denigrating about him, but just sitting around shooting the breeze, but you're on the radio, and you always forget there's 20 million people listening.
Yeah.
And he calls in a couple of days later, and he attacked me. I mean, he just went berserk, and it was like, holy Christ, right? So then I made sure that I knew the next time he was going to call in. And the next time he called in, I went to work on him, and I annihilated him. And then over the years, Gary would play him making mincemeat out of me, and he would never play the one where I got the better of him. And finally, one day I said, Gary, everybody says you play the one with Dice railing all over me, but you don't play the one where I got over on him. And Gary says, it's not funny when you win. I said, you son of a bitch. And he's right. The people live to see me get beat up. Dice is an old friend. I've known him for.
But any contact with Dice today?
I saw him. It's so funny. I just saw him, and you realize it was probably 3 years. It was just before the pandemic. We ran into each other at the Carnegie Deli. But, we never hung out or anything like that. But whenever, we go way back to the East Side Comedy Club, 1980, and he's just a nice, he's a gentle guy, and I'm a gentle guy, with two filthy guys and old pals, not a big deal. It was always fun when he came on the show, and with Hot Tub Johnny and Downtown Ronnie, and it was funny because I was good friends with Dice, and I was also good friends with Sam Kinison. Bob Goldthwait Goldthwait and Kinison went at it. Not really on our show, but in the comedy world. But Goldthwait never, I don't know whether he didn't like me or he's just one of those guys that really kind of didn't like anybody. He was kind of weird, but funny, funny guys. But I always wondered if Dice and Sam were in the same range. And, meanwhile, that's it. It's all theater. It's professional wrestling. You realize that, it's all bullshit, Like Pat Cooper used to come in and go nuts, and you'd think he was going to tear the place apart. And he'd look over at me and Fred, and he'd wink, like, aren't we having fun? That's just how it works,
Now, a few years back, you did, it was like a 2.5 hour long video that was put out online with Billy West and then John the Stutterer, as people would know him. I was wondering, how did that come about? Who contacted who? How was that experience for you?
At some point, I can't give you a date. I don't, if me and Billy and John did that 2 years ago or 3 years ago, then it had to be a couple of years, say 5 or 6 years ago, a guy called me up and said, Jackie, I have a party every year here at my house. He lives in an incredibly wealthy area outside of Los Angeles, where everybody has horses in their yard, one of those things. Really successful guy, and just such a sweet guy, and huge Stern fan. He said, listen, I want to mix it up a little bit. He said, I have my friends from grammar school, high school, college, business. I invite all my guy friends, and they come. They tell the wives you're staying home. They come, they play poker. I have topless girls in the pool. We get stoned, we get drunk, we have a great old time, and I'd like you to come. And he paid me a stupid amount of money and flew me out, and I got to stay at, whatever hotel I wanted for a couple of days. It was just great. And then I think it was the next year, he said, do you want to come back? I said, yeah, can my girlfriend come? He flew both of us, and and we stayed like 3 or 4 or 5 days. He's wealthy, but he loved me, and it was great. And after maybe 3 years, let's say 3 years. He said, Jackie, what else can we do to spice this up? You know, it's so fun. He says, what about Stuttering John? I said, listen, I'll give you his number and you can call him, but after that, you're on your own because I'm not going to be responsible for that guy. I mean, he's my friend, or he was my friend, but I'm not going to be responsible for him. So I don't want you to call me up and say, hey, John didn't show up or whatever. So I just gave him the number. He calls me up and he says, you know, it's funny because I called John and he took the gig and then he called me right back and said, could I have an advance? So me and John went. And you know, some of my stories are just not, Tyler, they're impossible to believe, but I don't have to make them up. This guy, I don't want to say the guy's name, but this guy got into a small traffic accident in Los Angeles. And Billy West, you know who that is from the Stern Show, happened to be there and saw the accident. So he was the witness that this guy didn't do anything wrong. And he, of course, freaked out when he realized it was Billy West from the Stern Show. That was crazy enough. So Billy was invited to the party from the first time. He said, oh, by the way, your old friend Billy West is going to be at the party because we have a weird connection. So Billy was there from the beginning. So all of a sudden, here we are, me and Billy and Stuttering John. And we don't see each other every day. You know, I see Billy once in a blue moon, see John once in a blue moon. And all of a sudden we're together and we're sitting at a table, you know, and there's topless girls walking around. They're being ignored because all these guys are slowly but surely gathering around the table. And me and John and Billy weren't trying to entertain them. We were catching up, you know, and oh, remember this, remember that. And we're laughing our balls off. And I said, you know what, you guys, we really should be taping this. This would be really, really great. And this guy that John brought with him to the party said, I can make that happen. I said, I think it'd be great. He said, I think so too. And he arranged it. And I guess he had a studio that I don't know how much they're still involved. I don't want to give away who he is or anything, but he got it together. And I think 3 cameras, I know at least 2, but it might've been 3, it might've been 4 cameras. And, you know, he paid me and he brought me out and put me up. And me and Billy and John sat there for, I think close to 3 hours, just going on and on and on and on. And the time flew by, but, you know, John's a little bit negative and I'm more about laughing and how much fun it was. And, you know, not like who was a dick and enough of that comes out anyway, but it wound up being, you know, you want a little good cop, bad cop, but it was a perfect mixture. I don't think anybody was really ready to jump in and do it again. And I think he tried to release it. The guy tried to release it, you know, 15 minutes here, and finally said, the hell with it. And I think now the whole thing is just on YouTube. Yeah. And you can just go sit and watch all 3 hours. And people, it's funny, so many people don't know about it. When they see it, they're like, wow, nobody ever told me about this, you know, because I guess it's boring old crap, but not if you're a Stern fan that listened all the time. It's like a gold mine, you know. It's like it's a real good bite of nostalgia, you know. But it came about very organically. It wasn't calculated like, hey, let's get a couple of the old guys and see if we can, you know, strike some flint here. It came about organically.
No, it was really cool to see. It was great to see you 3 laughing again, all in the same room. I mean, actually, just before this, I was watching the first time the Jackie puppet got introduced and seeing the life that came to Billy West's eyes when that happened. Did you get to keep the Jackie puppet? Do you have that?
No.
That's a crime.
People ask what it is. I say, I don't know. I don't know if you read my book, but the whole thing about when it went missing, do you know about any of that? That was
when the goof on Gary.
When they moved to Sirius, all of a sudden somebody said, "Where's the puppet?" And then the puppet was missing. And then somebody said, "Well, you know, Jackie came in and did some interviews at K-Rock." after we left, just as we were leaving, I went in and I did a couple shows on my own. I got interviewed by Penn Jillette a couple times. And they said, "Oh yeah, Jackie probably stole the puppet." So I said, "Yeah, you're right. You got me. I stole it." And it was a whole big deal. And I actually took a picture of the puppet and blew it up on my printer to the size of the puppet and mounted it on cardboard so it'd have some, some strength. And had whoever it was take a picture of me holding the Jackie puppet. It was a piece of cardboard with a picture on it, but it was the Jackie puppet. And I'm holding a copy of the New York Post from that day, like a kidnapper, so it's a picture from that day. So they're all excited. They found the Jackie puppet and they're going to come get it with the Stern News 100 van and everything. And then I called up and said, "Listen, you morons, of course I don't have the puppet. What are you, stupid? And here's your puppet." And then I turned it sideways so they could see it wasn't, I said, "Of course I don't have it." I said, "But I got a good idea. Why don't you get that moron that comes in with the lie detector and line us all up? I will go right in the front of the line and just ask one after the other, ask, 'Do you have the Jackie puppet? Do you know where it is? Do you have the Jackie puppet? Do you know where it is?' And just go down the line, and I'm sure that's a great way to find the puppet." And Steve, what's his face from the Stern 100 News, says that's the greatest idea. That'll be a great show. It'll just, the listeners will love it. Blah 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 blah. That it was never heard of again. The next morning, Howard brought in the puppet. He had it at home the entire time. And that never made it to the air. Nobody knew about that. That was another one of Jackie stole a puppet. Jackie's a piece of dirt. What a piece of garbage. Jackie stole a puppet. No, he didn't. Howard had it, which is fine. That's the game. That's, I don't fault them for that. That's great radio, but it makes me look like a dick. And I am so far from being a dick,
All right. Last deep dive on about the Stern show there. This one, all right, about the Channel 9 show. All right. So we're going back now.
What about it? That was the most fun ever.
Okay, well, hopefully you've got a good story about this, because I'm a huge Iggy Pop fan. And when they brought Iggy Pop onto the Channel 9, they set it up with David Bowie's ex-wife, who was trash talking him. And David Bowie and Iggy Pop, of course, were very close. And Iggy was not into it. I was just wondering if you remembered that, had anything there.
That's, you know what that is? That's a punk rock thing. I'm sure we were sitting there, and I'm sure me and Fred were writing jokes for it and writing lines for it. And I'm telling you, I'm sure I was reading the newspaper while he's talking to Iggy Pop. I could have cared less.
On the topic of film, though, I was wondering if you had any experiences you wanted to share, moments that stick out that didn't make the DVD or special features of radio, about your time filming Private Parts with the late great Ivan Reitman.
That was the most fun, one of the most fun times I ever had in my life. And when I did my autobiography, I had enough for 2 books, and I had to do Sophie's Choice and pick the chapters that I wanted to include. And it was like your children. What children are you going to leave at the dock when you take off for America, And somehow the chapter about the making of Private Parts didn't make it into the book. It still makes me crazy, because it had them leaving Jackie out, them underpaying Jackie, them not giving Jackie credit. I mean, a lot of the negative things that my problems with the Stern show were integrated into that chapter, but it was fun. Nonetheless, it was exciting. And it was so funny because Betty, what's her face, was the director, and she was so nice. And there was a scene where I'm going around bugging Howard to give me parking money. When I first started on the show, I was only on 1 day a week. And he was supposed to give me parking money. My wife, she wouldn't need my wife yet, beat him up into saying, "All right, I'll give Jackie $25 a week for parking." Because I'm driving into Manhattan and I'm parking, and it's costing me like $50 or something. And I had no money, it's a poor comedian. And of course, he'd never have the money, or I'm sorry, I don't have it on me. Let me owe it to you. You know, it's just like college. The rich kids never have money. They got credit cards. So you buy the pizza. You know, things don't change. But we did a scene where I'm bugging him for the money. And she said, all right, Jackie, I want you to pretend that you've got a 3-foot piece of rope tied to your belt and Howard's belt, and stay that close to him and shadow him around trying to get your money. And I couldn't do it. I'm no actor. I felt like, well, I don't want to get too close, and so that scene bombed, and it would have been a great scene. It would have been, so good for me. And maybe it came out all right and just didn't make, there are lots of good scenes in movies that don't make it in for whatever reason. Maybe I did it too well, who knows? But the first time a girl was naked on the Stern Show, I wasn't there in reality, but in the movie I was. And I was sitting there, and for 2 days I sat next to Jenna Jameson as she took off her clothes and handed them to me, and I folded her bra and folded her panties, and we did take after take, and it was just so much fun. But when they filmed Private Parts, because Howard had to be on the air and had such an erratic schedule, they couldn't have regular shooting hours and then everybody breaks for lunch and then shooting hours. They didn't have lunch and they didn't have dinner because they had to make hay while the sun shone. So they had a thing called French hours, which means nothing to me, but that's just what they called. French hours means there's an incredible buffet from breakfast to dinner, anything you want that's available 24/7. And it was the most ridiculous amount of food. And for the 3 days Jenna Jameson is there, she's naked, just wearing a bathrobe, and she's standing at the buffet, but her bathrobe's open. So here's her boobs and her twat, and she just, and it's like the Three Stooges. You see the techies walking into each other. It was absolutely hysterical. I said, does anybody see how funny this is? Oh, it's just great. Just great. Yeah, we really did have fun making that movie. Really had fun, God, there was a rally, the rally at Bryant Park was like 10,000 people, and they shot it from a helicopter, and me and Robin and Howard, and Gary and Fred were on the stage, and AC/DC played that same song over and over and over and over for like 5 hours. So to this day, if I hear one chord from that song, it's like so nostalgic, And me and Robin did the bump. I think we might have been the only two people in the entire crowd that remembered what the bump was from like 1970, Just great fun, great fun, great fun.
Now, being a Canadian, I would be amiss to not inquire about another recent loss to the comedy world, who is also a regular, the great Norm Macdonald. Do you have any stories you want to share about Norm?
I don't have any real Norm stories. I loved when he came on, and we hit it off, and he loved me because he loved jokes, and I love jokes. But I did give him a joke that he did on Saturday Night Live. We weren't real close, but I liked him, and he loved the show, and he totally respected what I did,
Yeah.
And he did Bob Dole, and he would come on Saturday Night Live and do Bob Dole. And Bob Dole always had that fake arm, not fake arm, but his arm didn't work. And he always had a pen on his hand. So it looked like he was holding something. And I gave Norm the idea. And Saturday Night Live, Bob Dole went to walk up on the podium, and he tripped and fell down. And when he got back up on the podium, the pen was sticking out in the hair on his head, which is just such a stupid, mean visual, But I always felt so good. That's the only thing I ever contributed to Saturday Night Live that I knew of. But it's pretty fun. But he was just a sweet guy, And I really wish I had known him better, because Artie always waxed poetically about him, and he always said what a big fan Norman was of mine, and that always made me feel good,
Well, we'll just try and get a hold of Beetlejuice and see how he's doing.
Oh, Jesus Christ!
You know what? When's the last
That's,
time you saw him?
last time I was on the show and he was there.
No.
There was never a time that he walked into that room where I wasn't like flabbergasted. You always do a double take when it's a midget, but he's not just a midget. I know you're not supposed to say midget, but geez, to me, little person is as insulting as midget.
That's one of the
But
nicer things you could say about him.
yeah, right. That's his shining feature is that he's a midget. God, and
No,
he's egotistical, which is just beyond the pale.
well, big head, big star.